tonight I want to start off by telling a story. Some of you have heard this before, but this story really ties into the lesson that I'm going to bring tonight. The story goes like this. This was from the Asian Tao. Have you heard of the Tao, the Chinese philosophy? It's actually pronounced Tao. It's spelled T-A-O, but it's pronounced Tao. And this story is told of an old, wealthy gentleman from an old Chinese village. And he hadn't ventured out of his homeland too many times. So one day he decided to take a visit outside of his village and just check out the other areas. And as he was walking, he came upon this huge mansion. He was astounded. He could not believe what he was seeing. And so as he marveled at this beautiful structure, the owner of this mansion came out, noticed that he was admiring his home, and asked him would he like to come in and take a tour. He said, "Oh, yes, I would." So they went into this mansion and they went in and he saw the various rooms and how majestic and beautiful it was and how the decoration was just marvelous. And as he went up to the second and then to the third floor, they approached this balcony and the view was amazing. He was astounded. He was blown away. It was breathtaking. So as he left the home, he thanked the gentleman for showing him his home. He went back to his old village. Now, he was a wealthy man, but he never spent his wealth. But when he saw that mansion, he wanted one just like it. So when he got back to his village, he called his mason in, and he described this structure. And the mason said, "That's amazing. I'm the one that built that one." He said, "I'll build it for you." So the mason got all the other contractors together, and they began construction on this mansion for him. Well, probably 3 weeks passed. He said, "I think I'll go and take a look." He had never seen a mansion actually being constructed, so he wanted to go down and see how things were progressing. As he got there, they were laying the foundation. He said, "Oh, what are you doing? I'm a little puzzled." And the contractor said, "Well, this is the foundation." He said, "What's that for?" He said, "Well," and he figured the man was joking. He said, "Well, that's where we're going to put the first floor on top of that." He said, "The first floor? What do we need a first floor for?" So again, the builder is thinking he's joking. He's going to humor him. He said, "Well, on the first floor, we're going to put on top of that the second floor." He said, "And we need that for what?" And by this time, the gentleman knew that he was serious. He said, "Well, this is where we're going to construct the third floor." He said, "Oh, no, wait, I'm glad I came. There's confusion. I don't want the foundation. I don't need the first floor. I don't need the second floor. I want the third floor view. That's all I want." Now, that sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? How can you have a third floor without the foundation, the first floor, or the second floor? But all he wanted was that third floor view. That's all he wanted. So this goes into my lesson tonight. The same thing happens in spiritual matters. We want that third floor view. We want to go beyond the veil, don't we? Talks about the veil that was broken, and we want to go beyond that. But just like this gentleman, we forget there are some steps we have to take to have that kind of view. But we do the same thing. Now that sounded ridiculous, didn't it? But what about the get rich quick things that are out there? You know, people buy into that, don't they? They want the wealth. That's the third floor. But they don't want to work hard, which is the foundation. They don't want to invest and save, That's the first floor. And then to work hard and learn the business, you know, the second floor. They want to bypass all of that, get to the wealth. What about the diet pill industry?
Oh, yeah.
That's another one, isn't it? We want the third floor. We want to be thin, don't we? But we don't want to eat less, which is the foundation. We don't want to exercise, which is the first floor. And we don't want to continue to eat right for a long duration of time, that's second floor. So that's where I'm going tonight. We have to learn that in order to reach the place we want to reach, we have to take the proper steps to get there. So the title of this lesson is Beyond the Veil, and how to get there. And my tablet just went out, so I'm going to need a Bible. Can someone read, while they're getting that for me, 2 Corinthians 3, 13 through 18? Need somebody to read that one for me? 2 Corinthians 3, 13 through 18. And then I need another person to read for me Hebrews 9, 2 through 11. And I titled this Beyond the Veil because it pertains to seeing and hearing what is going on beyond the veil. That's what we're going to be talking about. We know that the veil obscures us from seeing certain things. It obscures us from hearing certain things. But beyond the veil is exactly where we need to be, because that's where we're going to find the presence of God. So what is this place beyond the veil? First of all, it's an in-between place, in between heaven and earth. It's a place that defies logic. It defies all human logic. Some of the things that will be experienced behind the veil, there is no rhyme or reason to it. There's no understanding from a human standpoint. The first thing you have to understand before you even get to that place is that you do exist in more than one dimension. How many of you really know that? You hear that, but do you really understand that you exist in multiple dimensions? Your body is here, your soul is somewhere else. When people accept Christ, many of us never go beyond the foot of the cross. That's where we are, that's what we believe, and that's where we stay. We don't venture too much farther than that. Just like this wealthy gentleman, he didn't venture too far away from his village. And only when he went beyond the boundaries of that village was he able to experience something he had never experienced before. But that's the same thing it is with our spiritual walk. So the question is, how do we get to the veil? The answer, by following the pattern. There's a pattern that was given us by God with specific instructions on how to get there. So then the question is, well, what is the pattern that we must follow? Can I get someone to read those verses for me? Who has 2 Corinthians 3, 13 through 18?
You said 13 to 18?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Unlike Moses, who put a veil over his face so that the children of Israel could not look steadily at the end of what was passing away. But their minds were blind, for until this day the same veil remained unlifted in the reading of the Old Testament, because the veil is taken away in Christ. But
all right. Yeah, right there.
Okay.
You see what it says? Moses had a veil over his face, and it was veiled so the Israelites could not look steadily, and he said something that was beginning to pass away. He said their minds were blinded. So in essence, this is an analogy of if there's a veil, there's blindness. Something is obscured that you cannot see. And it says that until this day, now of course we're not talking about our day, but in the day of this writer, it said until this day, this same veil, this same blindness, this same lack of knowledge remains unlifted in the reading of the Old Testament. So he's saying that these stories in the Old Testament, the spiritual lessons are still being veiled in the minds of most people. They're still blind to the real meaning of the Old Testament stories in the book that Moses wrote. Who had the other one? Hebrews 9, 2 through 11. And then we're going to start talking about this pattern that we need to follow.
It reads, it says a tabernacle was set up. In its first room were the lampstand, the table, and the consecrated bread. This was called the holy place. Behind the second curtain was a room called the most holy place, which had the golden altar of incense and the gold-covered ark of the covenant. This ark contained the gold jar of manna, Aaron's staff that had budded, and the stone tablet of the covenant. Above the ark were the cherubims of the glory, overshadowing the atonement cover. But we cannot discuss these things in detail now. When everything had been arranged like this, the priests entered regularly into the outer room to carry on their ministry. But only the high priest entered the inner room, and that only once a year, and never without blood, which he offered for himself and for the sins the people had committed in ignorance. The Holy Spirit was showing by this that the way into the most holy place had not yet been disclosed as long as the first tabernacle was still standing. This is an illustration for the present time, indicating that the gifts and sacrifice being offered were not able to clear the conscience of the worshiper. They are only a matter of food and drink and various ceremonial washing, external regulations applying until the time of the new order.
Okay, we'll stop right there. Did you get the picture of that? They're describing this tabernacle that was set up by God. And he talked about the outer court, and the writer also mentioned the inner court, the holy place and the Holy of Holies. Those two were the inner court, and then the most deep inner court is where the Holy of Holies was. But you notice he said in the outer court, that's where all of these rituals were being performed. And he also said that this tabernacle was an illustration. In my translation, it says it was a symbol. So it symbolized a truth. Through that literal tabernacle, he's trying to teach us a spiritual truth. And that's what this writer wanted them to understand. We get so caught up in the actual rituals, and we forget and don't even go beyond what the rituals mean and what they symbolize and what God wants you to see in those things. The tabernacle is symbolic of what is true. So we're going to look at the tabernacle in a new light. Look at Exodus 25:8, and then we're going to go into the pattern. This is what I want to show you, the pattern that we must follow in order to get to the veil and beyond the veil. Exodus 25:8. And God said, "Let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them. And that was the purpose of the tabernacle. All of that furnishings, all of the building, all of the labor, all of the gold, the silver, the brass, it was so that God could have a place that he could dwell in among his people. He says, and make it according to all that I show you, that is the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, just so you shall make it. See, he said it right there. It's a pattern that we need to follow in this tabernacle. And this tabernacle included some marvelous furnishings. So let's talk about these 7 holy furnishings that are within the tabernacle. There are 7 of them. First one is the altar of burnt offerings. That's in the outer court. The laver, which is the wash basin, also in the outer court. Then we move into the holy place. And in the holy place, the inner court, is the table of showbread, the lampstand, and the altar of incense. 3 things in the holy place. Then, when you go into the Holy of Holies, now this is the part beyond the veil, we have the Ark of the Covenant, and we have the mercy seat, okay? Those furnishings are your pattern. Every last one of them are steps that each one of us has to take. So we're going to talk about them. So we just read in the other verse that we can now boldly enter behind the veil. Didn't we just read that? Every time.
No, I think it's just that spot.
Get over there.
Okay, we can now boldly enter into this place, this inner sanctuary behind the curtain. We now have direct access to God. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. But the mistake that we make is to think that just because we have direct access to God, is that we can have that access without following the pattern. That's the mistake that we make. He did say we had direct access, but you know, there are some steps you have to take to be able to do that. I'll give you an example. Let's look at any ruler, president, United States. There are several people that have direct access to him, right? But can you or I just get up and say, I'm going to go see the president today and just walk on in there and see him?
No.
There are some steps that have to be taken before we can have an audience before the President of the United States. First of all, they're going to do an extensive background check on you. They're going to know every detail of every single moment of your life before you have access. So if that is the case with a human ruler, what makes us think we can just go into God's presence and not take certain steps to see God behind the veil? Why do we think that? Because the word tells us, but we have to take the correct steps to get there. So, I'm going to give you a picture of this tabernacle compound. Do I need to walk over here? This tabernacle compound had a high fence all the way around it. There was only one way, one entrance to get in, and you had to come in from the east. So that meant you could not just come into this tabernacle from any direction that you desired. You had to come in that one entrance, and it was on the east gate. One way into the tabernacle.
Just go ahead, Donna, don't worry about
the gate. Remember it says, enter into the narrow gate? That's the only way that you can get into the tabernacle. It's not your choice. You got to follow this way. That's the first step. So you enter this gate. Has anyone seen the picture of the tabernacle? And you know that it has this little small opening. Okay, that's the gate. Only way you can get in. Now, upon entering this gate, the first thing you're going to encounter is the bronze altar. And this is where you're going to present your animal sacrifices. This is where you're going to slay and slaughter the animal. Okay? This is your first step in moving to beyond the veil. Slaying the animal. Picture your animal nature. What kind of baggage are we carrying? You want to enter the presence of God. He said you got to leave your baggage at the altar. You got to burn up some things. You have to slay some things. You have to slaughter some things. You have to get rid of the animalistic nature that's in you. You cannot walk into the presence of God behind the veil with that. That's the first step in the pattern. Laying your baggage on the altar. Remember I said the president's agents are going to do a background check? Okay, God knows your background. He knows what you're carrying. And he said, I'm making your load, your weight lighter. Don't bring that into my presence. Empty yourself of those things through my power, through my love. I'll show you how to do that. That's the first step. So how many of us have laid our animal nature down? And some people stay at that place for 30, 40 years trying to get rid of all the junk. And they don't realize they can't move any further until they do. Because it's according to the pattern. That's the first step. If you miss that, you might as well go back out the gate. That's the first one. Okay. Now, after you have laid your burdens and all those things that weighed you down and you have slaughtered them, sacrificed them on the altar, the next thing you encounter is the what? What's the next item? Anybody know? The water basin. That's where the priests would go in after they did the animal sacrifices. They would wash their hands. And also they would wash their feet. Wash your hands and wash your feet. So anything that you had left over from that animal sacrifice, you have another chance to be cleansed before you go behind the veil, before you enter the presence of God. You have another chance. So you wash in that basin. I love how it says you wash your hands and you wash your feet. You know, wash your hands of everything that you've been carrying all of this time. Wash your hands of it. And while you're doing it, every place where your feet have been, that has been a hindrance to your walk, wash your feet. Shake the dust off of them. Be clean. You're beginning to travel on a journey into the presence of God behind the veil. How many are at this stage? How many even knew that they had to take these steps? This is the pattern. This is the pattern. Okay, so now you've sacrificed the animal nature, you've washed, and now you can enter into the inner court. You notice that on the outer court, if you can picture this scene, every day people were bringing animals to the tabernacle and slaughter. So there's blood, there's this stench, you know, there's activity. But you notice when you get into the inner court, now you can't see that anymore. See what God is doing? He said when you take these steps, and there was a curtain that separated the outer court from the inner court, so now even if you look back, what's going to happen?
Couldn't see it.
You can't even see it no more. How many of us on this journey keep looking back, but we still see some things? We haven't gone beyond that first curtain. Because if you're still looking back and you're bringing up all that old stuff, you're still in the same place. God is trying to teach us something. You're not following his pattern. How many of us look back and still see that stuff?
Every day.
So that is an indication that you have not stepped into the inner court. That means that as much as you desire it, and the desire is a good thing, because God will give you the desires of your heart, but he said you have not reached that place yet.
You haven't taken the steps.
That's right. It's amazing what he's showing us here. I thank God for this. I learned so much from this lesson. And I thought I had entered into the holy place. I think I do, and then I just go right back out. You know, you can reach that peaceful place, and then you think, okay, then you go out to the real world. No, this is the real world. When you get into that holy place, that's the real world. You know, you don't say, well, I'm going to go back to that, but we do. So in the inner court, which is the holy place, the only thing in there is the lampstand, the table with the lampstand on it. So now you're in the inner place, and the only thing in there is a light, the true light. There's nothing that you desire more than anything is to have access to the true light, the lamp of God. And notice when those priests went in there, that was the only light that they could see. There was no other light shining anywhere but that one light, the true light, the Christ. See, a lot of us are still groping and moving around in the dark. We can't see clearly. That's an indication that you have not moved into the inner court. You know, we're still puzzled. We're still walking aimlessly. We're still fearful. We're still doubting. All of these things are indication we have not entered in. But we say we have because we want it so bad. But we have to be truthful about where we are, don't we?
Yes, we do.
In order for us to really get there, we have to be honest and truthful about where we really are. And we have to follow the pattern. And notice that the lampstand was represented, it had one branch and 6 branches that extended out from it that represent Christ as the vine, and we're the branches. See, God is lovingly beckoning us into this place. That's what he's doing. All of these images are something that we desire. And that's how the Spirit does. It gently and slowly and softly beckons you to come. Just like he told Peter, when Peter wanted to come out and walk on water. He just said one word, come. He's saying the same thing to you in this place behind the veil. He's saying, come. Come. I want you to come. So in the inner room, there is light. So that means on your walk, you should be able to see things differently at this point. The things that you even believe, the things that you were brought up and taught, in this place, it's like everything changes. But see, the problem with our walk is we don't want to give up anything that we've treasured for so long. And God is saying that's exactly what you have to do sometimes. You have to give up something in order to gain something better. But we want to hold on. And I am in no way saying that the thing that we learned as a child in our Christian walk is bad. Never would I say that. It was needful for that level. See, that's what we don't understand. God is taking us through different levels. And so, you remember Paul said, you know, when I was a child, I thought like a child. And then when I became a man, I had to give up child. It's the same thing. That's what he's talking about. The things we learn through religion, some of those things we have to let go. And once you become enlightened in this inner room, I'm telling you, things will change. Your thoughts will change. Your desires will change. And then, number 4, the table of showbread. Now this was across from the lamp. Now we know the showbread, it was 12 loaves of bread, and the priest had to come in and change that loaf, I think it said once a week. And they could only eat that bread in that place. They couldn't take it out into the outer court. See, that's where the animalistic part of you is. But he said this bread, the showbread, the 12 loaves, you can only eat it in the holy place. Feasting on God. Feasting on Jesus. Feasting on the Christ. Continuously. And that's why the bread was continually replaced. It never ran out. Can you imagine being in a place where God is just continually feasting and giving you things that you had never seen or tasted before? This bread from heaven. Can you imagine? But we get so caught up with the normal things, we don't want to let them go. The table of showbread. And they say it was also called the bread of the presence because now you're getting closer to that veil in this place, aren't you? We haven't quite made it to the Holy of Holies, but we are in a holy place. And then we move to the golden altar of incense. Now, let's not confuse this with the bronze altar that was at the outer court. This one is in the inner court, and it was made of pure gold. And I want to mention something else at this point. The bronze altar and the wash basin, all of those things were made of bronze. But when you get into the holy place, those furnishings were all made of gold. See, so he's even showing you through the elements, the base elements. Now you're walking into more refined elements, aren't you? It's the same thing with your Christian walk. You're going to walk into a more refined belief system. You're going to walk into a more refined relationship with God. It's going to be different from the walk you had out there. Pure gold, the golden altar of incense. And this incense, again, was burning continuously. So you notice, oh, and they said that this incense, I thought was interesting. It burned at the exact same time, twice a day, when the people were bringing the animal sacrifices. So do you get that picture? You're laying down these burdens. You're slaying them. There's a stench. Sin is ugly. It stinks. God can't stand the smell of it. But he said at the same time you're laying that down, they're in there in the holy place lighting up incense. So he smells the aroma of that and knows that you're laying down something. And he loves that it's a fresh smell and aroma. So he does not see that on the outer court. He doesn't see that. Every time they laid that down, they burned the incense. I thought that was very, very interesting. So that lets you know that whenever we get so caught up in our flesh, we have to understand that in the heavenly places that we can't see, there's something going on. And we just have to tune into that more and more and more. Now, number 6. Now we're going within the holy place called the Holy of Holies. And this was the most sacred place in the tabernacle. You are this tabernacle. So God, through this pattern that he has shown us, is letting us know that in you, in each and every one of us, is a sacred place. And that's where he is. But we don't reach that place too often. Now, I know in meditation, that is our desire. We always talk about reaching that place, that serenity, that calm. And that's exactly what God wants. He wants us to be still. He wants us to learn to be quiet. That's why there was a curtain between the holy place and the outer court. Too much going on out there. See, that's how the world is, just too much going on. But he wants you to be able to live in these holy places, that you don't have to worry about what's out there behind the veil. Again, we said you can't even see it. So in the Holy of Holies, we have the ark, and inside the ark, anybody know what's inside the ark?
God.
What are those 3 items that God commanded Moses to put inside that ark? Anybody remember that? I can't hear you.
Was it the 10 Commandments?
10 Commandments, the 2 tablets. Anybody remember what else? Aaron's rod.
Aaron's rod.
That was the tablets.
Wait a minute, let me think. I forgot myself. Oh my goodness. Wait a minute. Maybe I didn't put it on here.
Maybe, no, I was gonna say 2 tablets, that counts 2.
The manna. The pot of manna. So it was Aaron's rod, the pot of manna, and the 10 Commandments. So if you think about each one of those items, Aaron's rod symbolized authority. Remember when he gave him that rod? He gave him the authority with that rod to part the sea. He gave him the authority to turn these sticks into snakes. So that represented the authority that God has given you, the power God has given you. The 10 Commandments, his word, you will have it with you continuously. And the golden manna. Now, notice out in the holy place, it was in loaves of bread. But in the Holy of Holies, he told him to put in there the manna. That was the bread that actually came from heaven itself. You're feasting now on heavenly food. Can you imagine that? Feasting on heavenly food every day?
Wow.
Every day? See, we don't really think like that. But that's where God wants us to go. That's what's going on behind the veil. So that's what I'm asking you tonight. When you think about these steps, I'm going to ask some questions now. I want to hear from you. Yeah, you heard the pattern. Where are you? Where do you think you are?
I'm still sacrificing.
Still sacrificing.
Still sacrificing as well.
I would say the same.
Still sacrificing. Sacrificing?
Oh yeah, I'm cutting it up.
You cutting it up?
Learning it and cutting it.
Tina?
I'm still sacrificing too, yeah.
Sacrificing? Dolores? Where are you at?
Where I'm at,
On the pattern. Are you following the pattern?
I'm trying to. Like, I'm scared to say that I'm
No, don't be
perfect
scared
like
to.
I'm
No, don't be scared to say
I don't
anything.
look
This is,
back. Like, once I move forward, I don't look
Right,
back.
because-
well, that's what I'm saying.
Maybe
Say it.
I'm at that next level.
So you're
right in
So
the
you're
water.
washing, are you at the basin?
Washing your stuff off.
Washing,
Your
that's the
hands.
next step. Or you
Okay.
washing your hands and your feet, and then the next step is inside the veil, the most holy place.
I took a
The holy
look.
place.
The basin and the washing the feet was just when you're washing your hands of different things.
Yes. Yes.
I think I'm even a little bit further than that.
Good. That's good. That's what God wants to know. You have to know where you are.
Right.
And I'm asking just to see if you know where you are. I'm not asking to tell you, yeah, you need to be back there. No.
But I did have to do a self-check because, you know, I'm still, you know, we're not perfect, so I'm still sacrificing. But I do believe that when I present things and I wash my hands of those things and I don't look back.
And that's the way it should be. That's exactly what he wants. When we say we are moving forward,
Move forward.
we need to keep moving forward. And there are so many of us, we take 10 steps forward and then we take, you know, so many back. Just keep moving forward because there is a destination. You hear me say that all the time. We're not just on this journey walking aimlessly and don't know where we're going. We have a place that we're trying to get to. I made a note that said many see a veil as a indication that what is being veiled needs to be protected from the outside. Like this ark. Remember when one of the carriers of the ark and the ark went to topple over and was it Uzziah, I think, he grabbed it and he instantly died. You know, they think that God needs to be protected. And so that was an image of man reaching out and think he can help God. That was the symbolism of that. You cannot help God. God needs no help from you. God needs no protection from you. So the veil is not a protection that God needs it. What it was, you needed to be protection from the immense power that lies behind that. And if you're not ready for it, it's a protection. What happens when you come out of a deep sleep and you've been in the dark and somebody turn on a bright light? You can't take it.
Yeah, God wants us.
So it was a protection. The veil was a protection. That's why it says you have to follow the pattern to build yourself up to be able to peer inside that veil. It's a protection for you. It is not a weakness. What about the Islam religion where all of the women wear the veils? And that's where that misconception came from. It was like they wore the veil to ward off the lust of men, so to speak. So they would not see anything on this woman's body that they would desire. But I thought about that. You know, the marriage, when you lift up the veil, and it is really talking about the power behind that veil, the power that women have that has kind of been misconstrued in a lot of religions. They put women as weak and without power, but that veil symbolized that behind that veil was the power of God. And that image of the wedding was a marriage between a man and a woman, between God and us, and that was amazing to me. So that symbol needs to be looked at in a different way. It's not that women are weak. It's a power behind that veil. And when she raises that veil and lets you in, that's that divine union. And you got to begin to look at that like that. We look at it entirely wrong. We letting y'all have part of our power. Y'all need to look at that. You look that up. But let's look at one more thing right quick. Look at Daniel chapter 10. I want to show you something. Daniel had a vision. And I think this is an image of Daniel beyond the veil. Because when you're beyond the veil is when God will begin to show you some things. Remember I said things that defy human logic. And I don't have time to read the whole thing, but in Daniel 10, starting with verse 1, it said he had a vision of a glorious man. Verse 2 says, in those days I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. So that meant he was in meditation 3 full weeks. He said he ate no pleasant food, no meat or wine came into his mouth, nor did he anoint himself till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. And then he was by this great river. We talked about that in meditation. And at this place of deep mourning, he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose waist was girded with gold. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like torches of fire, his arms and feet like burnished bronze in color, and the sound of his words like the voice of a multitude. And he was the only one that saw this vision. So that means there had to be other people around. But there was such a presence by that vision, even though the other people around couldn't see what he saw, they felt it. They felt that power, and they were afraid and ran away. He saw the better part of himself. Can you imagine? There's a saying that says, as above, so below. As below, so above. God has designed two types of creation. Remember we said in Genesis 1, he created, and in Genesis 2 it says he formed. We remember in Genesis 1, he said everything was perfect and everything was good. In 2, there were little problems. You have to understand that in this next dimension, behind the veil, this place that we can't see, is the place of perfection, it's the place of power, and it's the place where your perfect image dwells. Barbara, there's a perfect you that you haven't even tapped into. Every last one of us, we have like an alter ego. I shouldn't say ego because that's a Lord. I got to find another name for that. But you have an alter presence with you. You have a perfect Pastor Davis that you have to tap into. That's what's behind the Holy of Holies. And that's what Daniel saw. He saw a vision of himself in perfection, the glorified Daniel. Don't you know there's a glorified Barbara?
Yes, it is.
Don't you know there's a glorified Dolores? Each one of us has that, but it's behind the veil. In meditation, these thoughts came to me. This was the night before he poured all of this lesson into me. And I want to share, as I was sitting there in the dark listening to the music, these are the thoughts, and I began to write them down as I came out of the meditation. So what is behind the veil? It is a dimension of knowing. You go beyond belief. Can you imagine that? All our life we are taught you must believe. But behind the veil, it's just a knowing. It's a knowing. All that I ever wanted to know is already known. Silence speaks more than any word that can be uttered. And I say that because when I sat in the silence, God spoke to me so clearly, but it wasn't in words. It was just a knowing, and Joanna, you were trying to describe that feeling. It's really hard to describe. It's just a place where you feel intense love. It is a place where you feel intense power. And it is a place where everything is all right. It's perfect. There's no language. All is known without speaking. Beyond the veil, darkness and light are one and the same. Can you imagine that? Darkness and light are one and the same. Because even though in meditation you sit in the darkness, it's beautiful. It's wonderful because it's a different type of darkness. Not the darkness that you experience over here. It's the darkness that you can't even describe.
It's not the worldly darkness.
It's not. It's not. And there's no fear in that.
Right.
It's a place where you can be. Not a place where you strive to become, a place where you can just sit and be who you are. A place that everything you had desired just is. There is no desire. Everything you thought you desired over here in this place behind the veil, it is. It exists. What you had wanted to become, it already is. The perfect you resides there behind this veil. You see, but you see with clarity. Not in part, but you see the whole picture. There is no yesterday, there's no tomorrow. There's only now. That's how eternity is. See, we can't imagine that. We can't imagine not thinking about the next day, or not thinking about what happened yesterday. We can't even comprehend that. But behind the veil, that's how you begin to think. It's only now. I concentrate on now. And Jesus taught that, didn't he? Mm-hmm. Don't worry about tomorrow. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Have anybody ever heard that saying? When you are ready, your teacher will appear. And I'm going to tell you, that teacher may come in a form that you never would expect.
Absolutely.
Because you're going to think it's going to be a person that might be from a Southern Baptist.
Come on.
You might think it might be a person from a Pentecostal church that's going to be your teacher. And it may be somebody from the Far East. It may be somebody, you never know. But when you're ready, God's going to send that teacher. And that teacher's going to take you to the next level. A spiritual path is going to take so many interesting turns. You're going to encounter so many different things throughout your lifetime. Sometimes you're on this path, you don't even know it. It's not a competition. No one is ahead of another person. For example, when you think about Jesus tending a flock, look at it this way. And this flock, Jesus is leading to a place, right? To greener pastures, right? And this herd of sheep is huge. Now, you got some sheep that are in the front of the pack. You got some sheep that are in the middle. You got some bringing up the rear. But think about this. The sheep in the front, is their vision at that moment the same as the sheep that's in the back? The sheep in the front are seeing something totally different, aren't they? Yeah. The sheep in the middle, are they seeing what the sheep in the front are seeing? Every place where you are, just because someone is seeing something different, but they're all going in the same place. You may get there at different times, but we're all headed to the same place in the same direction. So there is no competition, it's only love. So I'm going to tell you, once you get into this higher consciousness, this level of reaching out beyond where you've always been, I'm going to tell you there's no going back. Once your soul reaches a certain level of consciousness, you won't even desire the places that you have been. So that's what we want to talk about, beyond the veil and how to get there. And I hope that I gave you some steps, and I hope now that you know the pattern, the steps that you have to take to get there. And I hope you did an honest assessment of where you are based on those steps. So if I've done that, that's all I had desire to do tonight. Amen?
Amen.
Amen.